This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1612, Comic Talk.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek. Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Chris Everly.
And... welcome to the show. This is our Comic Talk episode where it's just random thoughts, all kinds of stuff, no format necessarily. This episode, we're going to put this in the can. We're recording this actually before we attend Heroes Con, and it should be going up actually after Heroes Con is over. Just wanted to get a little break, take a break from recording, so this will be hopefully a somewhat topical episode.
Yeah.
But you never know. All right, well, I'm going to throw this out to the listeners. I've been going back and forth on trying to think of something to do for an episode for this September 5th of 2016, because that's actually Jamie D's 50th birthday. And I like to celebrate his birthday because so many times people commemorate their people's passings, which is not really how I want to remember them. I mean, I've had a couple of those anniversaries come up recently, and it just hasn't been good going through that again. So I want to try to do something nice for his birthday. It's a big birthday, 50th birthday.
Yeah.
So I've been going back and forth, and I want to throw out to the listeners, I would like to do some sort of a just voicemail show or a clip show combination kind of thing, where I want the listeners to, I encourage you to call in, maybe just give your brief thoughts on Jamie, maybe a favorite memory, favorite clip. If you've met him, maybe like an experience of that.
Something that you went to dinner, you saw at a comic shop, you went to a con.
Just something like that. I just want to get a nice birthday episode for him. And I'll sort of give an example of what I'm talking about. If you do decide to leave a voicemail, I'm going to give the number. The number to call in would be 267-702-6642. Or if you want to record something on your own thing and send it to us via like an MP3, you can do that through comicgeekspeak.com, comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. Send us that. But, make sure you mention your name and just something. Here's something I'm thinking of. So, hi, my name is Brian Chrisman. I'm a sometime regular on the Comic Geek Speak podcast. And one of my funniest memories of Jamie D, it came up to me not too long ago. I can remember early on in the show, even before I even came on the show, whenever there was like a female guest on the show, or you had a woman leave a voicemail or send an email, got read in the air, inevitably Jamie would always say, "Marry me." I remember him just doing it all the time, and it made me laugh. But at some point, I remember Brian and Peter, or one of them, just said to him, "Hey, you probably shouldn't do that." I don't know if they got people calling in or complaining, but so they said, "Hey, Jamie, just maybe not do that anymore." So, so then flash forward to the first time we had Katie Cook on the show. And she's a huge geek, and she's going on about, like, her Star Wars collection. Hell, she had a lightsaber battle at her wedding.
Yeah.
Her Star Wars collection, talking about, Harry Potter and her Jim Henson, her love of the Muppets and everything, Fraggle Rock and everything. And I'm going, oh, my God. So then I look over at Jamie, and we just look at each other, and we both mouth, "Marry me." It was just, I just remember that so well. We looked, and we just clicked.
And you meant it to each other since you weren't going to get hurt, right?
No. Because it was just one of those flings. So that's sort of
funny.
That's the kind of stories, kind of thing I'm looking for. Maybe you met him at a con. Maybe you just have a favorite clip you want us to play again, or something like that. So I would encourage you, listeners, over the next 3 months before his birthday, to do something like that. And we'll do one for everyone on the show as well.
I'm glad you continue with that. I thought you were, hi, I'm Brian Chrisman. I'm a recovering collectaholic.
So it's just something because, there's so much sadness around with these anniversaries of deaths. It just knocks me out. I just want to do something nice.
Oh, I think that'll be a lot of fun.
So anyway, thank you very much.
I think I could even get my youngest Matt to come in and tell me how I threw him off my lap to get the box. At the one CGS Super Show. And Jamie was laughing at me.
I mean, that could be like an 8-hour episode.
Oh, my God.
Sake.
Yeah. That could...
So, anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So, Where do you want to start? Chris, you want to talk about the Hail Hydra because you actually read Captain America #1. Oh, by the way, spoilers.
Start with that. Yeah.
Spoilers for Captain America #1.
Oh.
Yeah, so I read, as you all know, I'm a lifelong Captain America fan, so I've always been reading the title. And so, Steve Rogers, #1, as we know, he was returned to his youthful prime by a sentient cosmic cube in the form of a young girl. This is from the Avengers Pleasantville storyline?
Pleasant Hill, I think it was.
Pleasant Hill, thank you. Pleasantville's a fine movie. Pleasant Hill. So, no surprise to anyone, of course, that Steve Rogers has returned to his youthful prime.
Right, well, that makes sense.
Yes, so I read Steve Rogers #1 by Nick Spencer, whose work I've really been enjoying on the Sam Wilson Captain America series. And excellent issue. And they go a bit into Cap's past when he's a young kid with his mother and showing his abusive father living in Brooklyn. And they're paralleling that with him taking on a Hydra squad trying to hijack and blow up a train. And, there's Sharon Carter's there. They bring back American Flag and Free Spirit, who are from the...
Oh, man.
Bird knows that from the late Grunwald era.
Yeah, and the AmeriCops are on their way. We saw that.
I saw that, yeah.
So, yes, Spencer loves his Grunwald cap, and I respect him for that. Jake wouldn't, but I do.
Indeed. And actually, there's a great scene where Free Spirit and American Flag are reminiscing on their days when Cap was like wearing armor and fighting in Serpent Society, and you'll enjoy it. So, it's very solid Captain America issue. They go into his relationship with Sharon Carter, where they are, and just his feeling on being back in youthful body. It's a very solid story. But then at the very end, they're taking on Zemo, who had escaped from Pleasant Hill. And there's a funny moment where Zemo is trying to recruit new Masters of Evil, and he ends up with, that tiger guy from Daredevil. I forgot his name from the
Flying
80s.
Tiger.
Flying Tiger. These C-list villains. It's done for comedic effect. Not exactly getting, the best band back together or anything like that. And Cap is fighting Zemo in Zemo's airship. And American Flag kind of disobeys orders and comes in to help him fight Zemo, and they defeat Zemo. And then Cap is clearly perturbed that American Flag, came into the ship and apologetically kind of turns on him and literally throws him out of the airship towards the Earth. And then he just looks at the reader and says, "Hail Hydra," and the issue ends. They'd established in the flashbacks that this strange woman, kind of dressed up like a flapper, had intervened between what's the name of Steve Rogers' mother?
Sarah.
Sarah, thank you. Had intervened between Sarah and her abusive husband and beating him up. And then we find out she's handing out flyers for this new civic organization called Hydra. So the internet went berserk when this book came out with this last panel. And I'd heard about it, but obviously I was going to read it anyway. So very interesting story. I enjoyed it. People were freaking out, is Cap a Hydra sleeper agent, this entire history? Because they're making it seem like in the story that since he was a little boy in Brooklyn, he was basically indoctrinated by Hydra. And I read one quote where people were flipping out on the internet, threatening Nick Spencer, and then Clark Gregg, Agent Coulson, went on and said, "Hey, tell your story. I want to see where it goes." And I echo Clark Gregg's sentiments. I've enjoyed Nick Spencer's take on the Sam Wilson Captain America. I'm interested to see where he's going to go with Steve. Do I really believe Steve Rogers is a Hydra agent? No. And anybody who's assuming that after reading one panel, relax. Just kick back and see where the story's going to go. But it was certainly startling, to say the least, and not something you'd expect at all. But, obviously I want to see where this is going to go. They're making you think at the end of this story that he's a Hydra sleeper agent his whole life. Now, do I think that's the case? Oh, most likely not, but I'm definitely along for the ride. So,
well, and even if it wouldn't be something I would want to read, because me personally think that's kind of crazy to do that, but it sure doesn't call for threatening him in any way, shape, or form. It's a comic book. I mean, come on. It's a comic book. The movies are great. The comics are great. Books are great. if you don't like it, stop reading it for a while. Come back when it changes. I don't get
Shane,
the threatening
go ahead.
part. That's insane.
I couldn't agree more. I think some. Now, I'm not going to give this much intellectual credit to everybody who's reacting that way because we all know how social media just breeds
Oh yeah.
just unparalleled idiocy. But some people may have taken issue with the fact that Captain America was created by Simon and Kirby, two Jewish Americans, and Hydra is essentially an offshoot of the Third Reich, going back to its origins with Baron Strucker. So some people may be taking issue with the fact that they're associating Steve Rogers now with an offshoot of Nazism. But again, it's one panel, so we have really no idea where the story's going or what it actually means. It's a great cliffhanger, don't get me wrong. But to make all these assumptions without having even seen how Spencer's going to realize this cliffhanger is to me is just foolish.
Yeah.
It was an excellent issue, and it also explores that the Red Skull. And Spencer always has a lot of political subtext in his books. He definitely did this with the Sam Wilson Captain America, and the Red Skull. Let's face it, he's kind of like a stand-in for Donald Trump here, just more articulate. And he's like trying to recruit disaffected people who are upset with the state of the United States, and the thing he's talking about immigrants and refugees and all these different things, and he's recruiting disaffected young men into the ranks of Hydra, and Spencer's definitely doing some bold stuff here. So I'm interested to see where it's going to go. But do I automatically assume Steve Rogers is a 70-year Hydra sleeper agent? I don't know about that, but I'm interested to see what he's going to do with it. So I recommend the book.
I'm looking at the solicit for issue 2, which comes out, I believe, June 29th. It says, as Steve battles a resurgent Hydra more dangerous than before, he must confront a ghost from his past.
Yeah, well, they established in the first issue that this mysterious young woman who intervened between Sarah and I think, is it Joe, the name of his father? I think it's Joe.
That's Steve's middle name, so probably.
Yeah, his abusive father. And she's she's a great street fighter, and she's dressed up like, she's just walked out of The Great Gatsby. And then she hands us, hey, come on down to our meeting. We talk about like politics and civic events and, blah, blah, blah. And it's got the Hydra sigil on it. So this is back in the 1920s. So it's very interesting how, Hydra is such a presence in the Marvel cinematic and TV universe. And they're definitely interpreting Hydra differently and along those lines now in the comic book as well. Like in this issue, no one is wearing the traditional Hydra uniform at all. It's just a bunch of guys, basically. So they're definitely approaching the organization in a different way than I think longtime Marvel readers are accustomed to.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just they're clearly trying to get it more in line with what you're seeing on television and in the films. That's my take on it, anyway.
All right.
Anyway, Steve Rogers, number 1.
Yes.
So,
all right. Well, then, it might be a little late now, but it's not too late when we're talking about this. How many of us have seen X-Men Apocalypse?
I saw it.
Saw it.
Yeah, I saw it with pants.
Yeah, me too.
So we've all seen it.
Okay.
oh, terrific!
Again, spoilers.
Yeah,
Spoilers.
spoilers.
Yeah.
How would you rank it in the 3 newer X-Men movies?
Now, when you say 3 newer, you mean
First Class, Days of Future Past, and
Yeah, it's
Apocalypse.
the Time Life X-Men Marching Through the Decades series. Of
Yeah.
I'd rank this one at the bottom, Shane.
I would too.
Yeah, that's about right, I think.
Yeah, it's a kind of a tricky one for me since I didn't really care that much for First Class, but I guess I'd rank it like a slice below, but not by much. First Class.
Okay. Do you rank it better than some of the first 3 X movies?
Well, I'm sorry.
Maybe better than Last Stand, but not the other 2.
Yeah, for me, anything's better than Last Stand, in my
agree with
opinion.
that, too.
I think it's just a dreadful film because it had such the direction, and it was horrific.
Yes, it was.
Do you mind if I jump in and talk a little bit about this new one right off the
Go
bat?
ahead.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, please.
I was excited for this because Bryan Singer was at the helm, and one of my favorite newer actors, Oscar Isaac. we all know him as Poe Dameron. I love him from two earlier films that did Inside Llewyn Davis, which is a great movie by the Coen brothers, and then the great indie film A Most Violent Year. He's a tremendous actor, and I think he has a great career ahead of him. I went to this movie, like, I love Days of Future Past. That's actually one of my favorite X-Men films.
Yeah, that's my number one, number two, depending on what
out
day.
of all of them.
Yep.
And he had a lot of the same cast back, a lot of outstanding actors.
Mm-hmm.
I found this movie overall very flat. I just
too.
felt it was. It felt like to me like this franchise is really running out of steam, and it's tired. And it just kind of felt like going through the motions, paint by numbers X-Men story. And and another thing is, and I didn't realize until I saw this movie how much the X-Men movies rely on Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And how important I think he is. A, Hugh Jackman's a tremendous actor. B, he is Wolverine. I mean, he just channels that character. And I realize now, having seen this film, how in all the X-Men movies, now granted, I liked First Class, and he only had a cameo in that. But in general, I think he anchors a lot of these films. Days of Future Past especially so.
Yes, absolutely.
And I thought he was – I mean, granted, he has a cameo, a great cameo in this film. But I think him not being in the movie, I think, for me, really hurt it. And I just thought – just for lack of a better term, I thought it was dull. I just thought it was very rote, very – of course Magneto's going to – lose his daughter, and then he's going to wipe everybody out. And I thought Oscar Isaac. I thought the look of Apocalypse was awesome. I thought he looked great. The makeup, the sort of the armor he was wearing, I thought that looked visually very compelling and striking. But in terms of the application of Apocalypse as a villain, just already once he wipes out Cairo, and he wants to. They barely even got into the fact that the whole philosophy that drives Apocalypse that was barely broached in the movie. So you're like, all right, he wants to rule the world. Like, what's he up to here? And plus, I'm interested to see how they're going to explain how Mystique, in like from 1983 to 2000, goes from a diehard X-Men again to now she's working with Magneto.
Well, all that stuff changes now, and we don't know what happened in the interim once Days of Future Past happened.
Right.
So all of that stuff's kind
We
of
are in a
light.
divergent timeline now.
Yeah, I mean...
I take that back. That's a good point.
So
Thanks for
I don't
reminding
mind
me.
all that stuff. I agree with you that I think Apocalypse visually looked spectacular. I thought for him being a villain was kind of flat. The story was a little choppy. I felt like his horsemen, with the exception of Angel, which made sense, I felt like the others were there just to say they had other X-Men in the movie. I think it would have been much better if he would have had more of his normal horsemen with Angel, and those X-Men like Psylocke and Storm and Magneto would have come from the X-Men side of things to help battle him. I don't necessarily think they needed to be villainous just to be in the movie, in my opinion. I mean, I was excited to see Psylocke, and to me she was kind of underused in this, and not in a great way.
That's a good point, Shane, because whenever they have all the characters, it's inevitable. There's always casualties in who gets sufficient screen time and who's barely developed, and she falls into that that latter category of where they didn't just do much with her.
And I don't need her to be fully developed in this movie, again, first time, but it would have been great if she was in on the X-Men side of it the whole time, battling Apocalypse and the other Horsemen. I loved the young versions of Scott and Jean to a certain extent, and Nightcrawler. I thought he was the best of that young, new, quote, new cast.
Great. Agree, yep.
But I think they were kind of underused. I loved Quicksilver's part, but that was almost too convenient for him just to come in right at that split second with the mansion. It was a great scene. I love the music, and I'll watch it over and over again. But again, it felt very forced to me at that point. For Quicksilver to be searching out to tell Magneto, I'm your son, to get to that part where Magneto is ripping things out of the earth left and right. I mean, devastation beyond devastation around the world, not just the city, everywhere. I don't know why he, after losing his wife and daughter, which, kind of felt bad for him in that way, I think if Quicksilver would have been there with Mystique and said, well, I'm your son, I think Magneto would have stopped right there. Because that's what he was longing for, the absence of everything that was taken from him, where here's something being given back to you. At that point, he could have stopped all that destruction, even though it had been going on for a while, it lasted like an extra 15, 20 minutes because Quicksilver kind of went, nah, I'm just here to help kind of thing. Okay, just tell him who you are, have him stop, and then you all go battle Apocalypse together rather than wait another 10, 15 minutes for that to happen anyway. So that part I was kind of disappointed in. I just thought that for the way this Magneto is in the end of this series in this film, that Quicksilver saying "I'm your son" would have pulled him out of that at that point.
That's a good point, though, and I'm glad you corrected me because I totally forgot about, and it's foolish of me, that it's a whole new timeline.
Oh yeah.
So they can do a lot. They can do it. You're right. They can do a totally different character arc now for a character like Mystique, who I think is still one of the most, because Jennifer Lawrence is a great actress, is one of the most interesting characters in this version of the X-Men universe.
The only thing about her in this film that I thought was strange was she was Jennifer Lawrence for so much of it and not Mystique.
I'm going to make a total wild guess. Maybe that was so she didn't have to wear that makeup all the time.
I absolutely think that was it. But
that's got to be a hell of an application.
But going from the first movie where she's learning that it's okay to be who she is to the second movie where she's almost a zealot about freeing other mutants to going back and kind of hiding again, I get why, because of what happened in the last movie and everybody would be looking for her maybe, or at least aware of her. It just seemed a little strange to me. But it wasn't bad. I mean, it was fine. And her character was great in the film. But yeah, there were a lot of things I liked about it, but they were bright spots. I just thought the overall story was flat, like you, Chris, a little bit choppy.
Well, one of my favorite bright spots, to use your term there, Shane, as Apocalypse is being defeated by essentially the Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And Apocalypse just says, I think he says, "All is revealed," and then he's destroyed. And that got me jazzed. I'm like, all right, I'm thinking, okay, has he seen into the reality of the Phoenix Force, essentially? And what Phoenix actually is? Because one thing I greatly fault in the comic book universe is they never should have brought Jean Grey back.
Oh, well, I don't disagree with that.
The Dark Phoenix saga was the ultimate example of a mutant power so cosmic and so unchecked that it consumed one of the most noble members of the X-Men, and then when they say, well, she was actually in a chrysalis on Jamaica Bay, and the Phoenix had her memories, and that whole circuitous how to explain Jean Grey is still alive thing, which I'm so sick. I always get very disenchanted when companies do crap like that because they dilute great stories. And I like in the film, even though I thought X-Men Last Stand was atrocious, but that they didn't do any of that, and they're just basically acknowledging that from the beginning, Jean Grey has this incredible latent power inside of her, and I think Apocalypse saw that essentially at the moment of his destruction. Mm-hmm. And remember, he's all about the strongest survive, and he was just annihilated by essentially the strongest mutant of all.
Yeah.
Essentially, I thought that was well done. So, I'm sorry, Murd, you were going to say something. I apologize.
It's okay, Chris. I've already forgotten what I was going to say.
I'm sorry. Well, Murd, what was your general take on the film?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in accord with a lot of the things that Shane and Chris have already said here. It's very much a style over substance thing here, and I guess it is appropriately 80s in that regard. But it's a lot of sound and fury. There's a lot of things in this movie that looked good and sounded good. I agree that the effects, CGI and practical, makeup and wardrobe are all very much on point. But there seem to be more concerned with the sound and look of things than they are with actually putting together a satisfying and substantive story. So what you said, Chris, about this seeming rote and how they're just kind of doing this movie because they promised they would do another X-Men movie and maybe the franchise is losing some of its steam, I think there is definitely some validity to that. I'll agree that Oscar Isaac made an excellent Apocalypse for as little as he was allowed to do with the character. I mean, the look was there. I maybe would have liked it if it weren't quite as obviously Egyptian, his costume design. They'd modernized it a little bit more, but Yeah, but the makeup effects were pretty good. His power sets were kind of all over the charts, but what really was lacking, as you've kind of already pointed out, Chris, was a clear motivation for him. You said that they didn't get very much into his personal philosophy of survival of the fittest, which is really he's kind of almost a one-note character in the comics, hitting that one notion of his as hard as he does, and they do, as you said, Chris, barely mention it in this movie. And I think it would have helped to create the spine of a story a little better if when he captures Xavier and has him broadcast his demands to the world, he does mention, let the strongest among you come to me, but that never actually comes to pass. Yeah. And it would have been better if we'd had a little more of his motives that way. But as it is, he really doesn't do much more than bellow and posture and telekinetically throw junk around. So yeah, it's for as limited as he was by the material, I think Oscar Isaac did a fine job, though. Yeah, the movie does it does well by certain characters, very well. I agree with Shane that young Scott and Jean were favorites of mine, and Nightcrawler, since he is still my favorite mutant. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Sophie Turner as the young 1983 Jean Grey, and I agree that scene where she unleashes the Force is very powerful. Seeing Apocalypse absolutely annihilate that, and that moment of epiphany that you mentioned, Chris, where he says, "It is revealed." That is tantalizing. And I hope that Bryan Singer's view for this is going to be that the Phoenix Force turns out to be extraterrestrial in the end, as opposed to just an extension of Jean's own mutant powers. But yeah, the two of them together, Scott and Jean, was fun to see. And there are other characters, too, that were less well-served. We mentioned Psylocke barely got any screen time at all. Olivia Munn up there basically cosplaying Psylocke and being a visual effect more than she was a character. She had like 2 lines. And that's kind of a shame because Betsy Braddock is a character. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wish that they had given filmgoers an opportunity to get to know her as such. Instead, it's just Olivia Munn and her absurdly long psychic scimitar jumping and slashing and dying, I think, by the end. I really didn't see what happened to her by the end of the movie.
I think she ran away. Yeah, she runs away. Okay.
So we may actually get to know her at a later time. She's most associated with the 90s incarnation of the X-Men anyway, so maybe she'll be in the next movie. Angel, though, is one example of a character that was very poorly treated here.
Oh, absolutely. Huh.
Yeah. He's a founding member of the team in the comics. I can almost imagine, and I almost hate to impute such pettiness to Bryan Singer, but I can just picture him saying to himself, okay, the Angel is one of the things that people remember fondly about that one X-Men sequel I didn't get to direct, so, well, let's go ahead and crap on him as much as possible. So they interpret him as this punked-out, Johnny Rotten cage fighter guy who then gets mutated into the Archangel and dies.
Yeah.
That really kind of sucks. And on behalf of Danny, who couldn't be with us for this episode, I hope she hasn't seen the movie yet, but when she does, I hope she's not too disappointed in the relatively small role that her favorite X-Man Jubilee has to play. She is present. She has several lines of dialogue. She's a prominent character, but she's really not there to do anything more than wear a yellow jacket and be recognized by longtime X-Men fans as Jubilee. She doesn't even use her powers. We didn't see any of her plasma bursts on screen.
Right.
That's just kind of too bad. The Quicksilver sequence, I'll agree with Shane that it was a little convenient that he showed up when he did. The sequence of him saving everyone from the explosion of Avengers Mansion, a little over the top, but that, again, is good for the 80s. I do think, in general, this is one film that does a very good job of channeling its host decade, since that's kind of the theme of this series of X-Men prequels. Mm-hmm. Certainly, it does more with the 80s as a setting and as a cultural resource than First Class did with the 60s.
Right.
So this film, it really felt 80s. It referenced all the right things, both culturally and politically, and it even sort of models itself after some of the filmmakers of the era. There are times when I felt like I was watching scenes from like a Spielberg or a Zemeckis movie.
Well, and it isn't afraid to make fun of itself for being the third movie, and aren't third movies always the worst? I enjoyed that little banter back and forth coming out of Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
Totally agree, Shane, because self-referentialism is also very 80s. Yeah. But yeah, the Quicksilver thing, I didn't like it anywhere near as much as I did the time in a bottle scene from Days of Future Past. Maybe it's just that I don't like the Eurythmics anywhere near as much as I like Jim Croce. Maybe it's just that I can recognize shameless self-repetition when I see it. But yeah, that scene didn't do it for me in quite the same way. But I will say this, MTV would have killed to have something like that on their channel in 1983.
Oh, yeah.
as a video for any song. It does kind of leave me wondering, though, what Quicksilver is going to be running around to in the next one. Like Ace of Base? Is he going to be doing the Macarena?
It's Sir Mix-a-Lot. That's what it'll be.
He likes big butts and he cannot lie. Yes. And then there's Magneto and Mystique, and and Professor X himself. Xavier was pretty much on point, I think. I liked the stuff that happened at the school the best. Those were the parts of this movie that worked the best for me. Other things kind of got us off track. I mean, you mentioned the Weapon X cameo, Chris, about how we kind of derail the plot and take a certain number of characters up to Canada just so we can get a naked Logan running around and escaping into the wilderness.
Well, and I'm okay with that in the fact that since Wolverine or Logan isn't part of the story, at least he's in there in a way that makes sense for his character and the history. It didn't make sense for the story of the movie, but yes, he's in Canada. Yes, it's Weapon X. Yes, he looks like it. Okay, I was good with that. At least that part itself made sense for Logan. It didn't make sense to be put in the middle of this movie, but at least there was something. If they were going to force it in there, this made sense to me to force it in this way.
Yeah, well, I do agree with you there, Shane. Mystique and Magneto, I've never really, from First Class on, I've never really understood what kind of track they're supposed to be on here. They don't seem to have a coherent arc. I'm not seeing unidirectional, believable character progression with them so much as I am toggling, flip-flopping. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Shane, how the Mystique status quo, where she is in her life's journey and her frame of mind, how she jumped from First Class to Days of Future Past to where she is now doesn't necessarily make sense. I'm really in agreement with you on that. It's like these characters flip-flop between different frames of mind, different ideological stances at the drop of a hat, just depending on what the writers want of them. And that is not very strong screenwriting as far as I'm concerned. Magneto, especially. I mean, First Class totally lost me when Magneto, near the end, killed Sebastian Shaw and then came out and said, oh, guess what? All of a sudden I've decided I'm going to be a mutant demagogue now. Humans are the enemy after all. Come and join me as I bomb everybody. Yeah, and then he kind of stepped back from that by the beginning of the next movie, and now by the beginning of this movie, he's in yet another situation. He's found domestic bliss with this pretty but personality-deprived woman he's met along the way somewhere, and he has this adorable little daughter, and as soon as I saw the daughter, Chris, I think you probably saw this coming too, but I just said, oh, okay, how long is it going to be until this little girl is either A, captured, B, killed, or C, both of the above? And sure enough, I was so disgusted, I nearly physically vomited in the theater when we got to that scene where Magneto and his wife trail little Nina into the forest, and there's this regiment of soldiers standing there holding this precious little daughter by her throat. Just so goddamn predictable and cliched, and as Danny would say, tropey, not to mention maybe a little misogynistic, because by the end of that scene, not only is little Nina dead, but her mother is dead too, and they're both dead by the same damn arrow. It's like these characters are so disposable to the filmmakers, they couldn't even be troubled to contrive distinct means of death for the two of them. It's just, okay, let's just sweep this refuse, these two throwaway female characters into the rubbish bin so that we can make Magneto get angry and want to kill humans again. Yes. It's crap writing. It really is. Crap writing.
Caroline Wrath, ladies and gentlemen. Magnificent.
Yeah, that part really bugged me. So Magneto, as far as I'm concerned, is one of those most poorly served by this particular film. And Moira McTaggart wasn't done any favors either. I hated what they did with her in First Class to begin with. Now they bring her back. All she really does for the plot is provide some information for Xavier and company, and then she just spends the rest of the movie standing around looking very concerned. Just on the whole, stepping back from my picking on things that I found offensive or otherwise objectionable, it was worth a few thrills, this movie. I was at least entertained by it. All the glossy style over substance stuff, like I said, it's kind of appropriate to the 80s zeitgeist. But yeah, it was definitely plot weak, and yeah, so
I something else that I liked that they did in some ways, they threw a nod, I thought, when they got to the one part of getting on that jet type ship to fly off, and they made reference to, oh look, flight suits we can all get into. They were all black, kind of joking to me about the first 3 movies where they all had the same black costumes, but by the end of this film, they all had their good old-fashioned 80s and early 90s-ish X-Men uniforms individually, which to me looked spectacular. So that was a fun little kind of wink and a nod, I thought, to us and themselves to be able to, well, here's costumes. They've worked all these years. Now they will work. Whereas I think with the first X-Men movie, we were like, well, we can't put them in those. That won't work. It all has to be the same. Black costumes. Blah.
I also enjoyed the battle on the psychic plane as the apocalypse grew bigger.
Yeah.
That was just, I thought that was a sort of fun shout out to, we've seen that innumerable times in X-Men stories where Xavier or Jean or whoever is battling some entity on the psychic plane. I thought that was fun, the way they did that.
Hope I didn't cut that conversation short with the movie, but on to Muddle the Murd, our trivia contest. Now, actually, Shane, I don't know if you knew this, but we actually have some more prizes came in.
No, I didn't know more prizes came in.
So I'll let you look through them, but
nice.
This came from our anonymous listener again. But up for this episode is a Tom Hodges Wonder Woman sketch. And, Murder, you ready?
I'm ready.
This comes to us from Rob Anderson.
Oh, Rob.
So, he says...
Maybe he'll be nice to me.
Maybe he will. So here you go. Question 1, pre-1970 DC. In All-Star Comics number 1 from 1940, the Spectre is on the trail of arsonists. When Nick Brandt, one criminal involved in the plot, attempts to escape in his car, the Spectre stops him with one of his many powers. Which specific power does the Spectre use to stop Nick Brandt's car?
He grows to giant size and grabs it off the street.
The Spectre uses his ability to increase in size. Excellent.
Thank you, Rob.
He says here parenthetically, a giant Spectre stomped the car with his foot before reducing him to nothing but a brain to read his mind and then simply blinking him out of existence. The Golden Age Spectre did not play around.
Wow. And I thought he didn't really get serious until the Michael Fleischer stories of the 70s.
Oh, wow, no.
Pretty hardcore 40s Spectre.
Oh, yeah. All right, question 2, 1970 to 2000 Marvel. In 1976, the year Howard the Duck ran for president, the Howard the Duck Treasury Edition featured an original story by Steve Gerber, Sal Buscema, and Klaus Janson entitled 5 Villains in Search of a Plot. In the story, Howard teams up with the Defenders to face a very odd assortment of supervillains, each making their very first appearance in the Marvel Universe. Name 3 of the 5 villains.
Shucks. Well,
no, that's not one of them.
Yeah, okay, so I'm already 0 for 1. I've never heard of this story, but I kind of want to read it now.
Of course you do.
5 villains without a plot. All right, do you recognize any of their names, Brian, or are they all new to you?
I recognize a name, but not as a character. But none of these really sit with me at all.
Yeah, all right. I don't think I'm going to fare very well here. Well, when I think of Howard the Duck, I always think of Dr. Bomb.
No, that is not one of them.
That is not one of them. Okay. The elf with a gun?
No, that is not one of them.
Manslaughter?
Nope.
Doeth.
All right. That's 3 wrong guesses. I think.
How about may I jump in, Murd?
Sure, please do.
How about the space turnip?
No.
All right.
Okay, Murder, you're ready. The answers are Black Hole, Sitting Bullseye, Tilly the Hun,
I love Gerber.
Spanker, and Dr. Angst. It says here parenthetically, the entire team appeared again in Sensational She-Hulk's number 15 to 17, where She-Hulk also teamed up with Howard the Duck for what it's worth.
Well, all right. I was just going to quip that 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 was probably the last appearance of those characters, too, but Rob has demonstrated that it wasn't.
That's correct. All right, question 3, post-2000, independent. In Asterius Polyp, the brilliant Eisner Award-winning graphic novel by David Mazzucchelli, what is the profession of the main character, Asterius?
All right, I have a copy of this. I promised Big Jim Miller I'd read it one day and we'd talk about it, but I haven't read it yet.
It's a great book.
I'm going to say architect.
Oh, my God!
Yes!
Okay.
Yes, he is.
He's a professor
Yes.
of architecture at a university. So either professor or architect are acceptable answers. God damn it, Merd. Wow.
Merd, do you know what his birthday is?
The 12th of no.
It's mine, June 22nd.
Oh, cool.
Which is why I got excited. Not only because I and one time wanted to be an architect, they threw that in there. I'm like, oh, well, this is the bee's knees now.
Like George Costanza, you want to be an architect?
Yeah. Before there was a Seinfeld and a George, I was going to be an importer-exporter, but no, I did. I took some architecture.
You want to be my latex salesman.
There was in high school, there was an architecture drafting class I took, and I really considered it. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's a great book, Merd. I can't wait for you to read it.
It's tremendous.
I will get to it one day. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Rob Anderson for going easy on me this time out. In a way, it's almost a shame that he didn't muzzle me because if he had, I could have taken his prize down to Heroes Con and given it to him on Saturday.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man
on the
face of the earth.
Of the earth.
Hey, this is anybody but Lou Gehrig. You're stealing my bit.
Oh, God. We're coming apart at the seams, ladies and
All
gentlemen.
right, which means it's going to be a quick episode, a good time to stop. And anything else anybody has to bring up?
No, I'm good.
Nothing comes to mind.
All right.
X-Men Apocalypse. Go see it if you want. It's okay. Not the greatest. There you go.
Let's give our ratings up for the film, gentlemen.
I'd
Good
go
idea.
with 3. 4.
Yeah, it's a 3 for me, too.
I give it a 2. 2 frickin' swears.
Okay. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. I was waiting for the echo to come back. Send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, as Pant said at the top of the episode, the number is 267-702-6642. Please send in your Jamie memories, fun quips, quirks, stories, whatever. Make them fun. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Thank you for the Muddle of Nerds. Keep them going. We have a slew of prizes. Oh, my God. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is Comic Geek Speak.
That's all, folks.